Ladies, my fellow mommies, we are always so busy, on the go, kids screaming in the back seat, sleeping babies. I have the ultimate hack for you.
Welcome to the Stay Fit Mom Podcast with Krista and Tracy, your go-to girls for health, fitness, and keeping it real in mom life.
If you can't seem to get in a good groove with your nutrition and exercise program, this is for you.
We've coached thousands of women using macros for over 8 years, and I'm well known around here for my 5-day meal prep videos.
What does a macro balanced meal look like?
Hit subscribe to the Stay Fit Mom Podcast and join us for a fun, meaningful journey toward a healthier, happier you.
You got this, Mom.
All right. I have a few episodes this season that hold a very special place in my heart, and this is one of those episodes. Today, I get to interview Chelsea, who's actually one of my closest friends. She's a client turned coach, and she has an amazing story surrounding her special needs daughter that is exclusively tube-fed macro balanced meals. She's counted macros herself for years. Like I mentioned, she's coached for Stay Fit Mom for years. And I know that this powerful story of resilience and a mother's love will leave you deeply inspired. Chelsea, welcome to the show.
Hi. Thanks for having me. I'm excited.
You bet. Okay, so tell us, Chelsea, who are you? Tell us about your life, your husband, your kids, hobbies, workout routine.
I'm Chelsea Cohen. I've been a stay-at-home mom for 11 years, and I started tracking my macros back in 2017 after I was postpartum with my youngest. And then 3.5 years ago, I started coaching, which was so unexpected, something I didn't think I'd be doing, but I love it. And then I've been coaching at my CrossFit gym, which I do love. And another new adventure, I've been subbing at my kids' schools in our local school district. So that's fun. And it's giving me appreciation for full-time working parents. It's a lot, but I'm enjoying it. But then my husband, he's a high school assistant principal. And we have 3 kids, London, who's 13, Layton, who is 10, and then Lauren, who is our special needs girly. She's 7. And then I'll just mention this because I'll talk about it later, is we are very involved with our church community. We love our church and our support team there for Lauren specifically, but just our whole family in general.
Awesome. And just a little bit of background for how Chelsea and I met. We met at a Mothers of Preschoolers group, and it was such a pivotal time for me. I'm still friends with so many of those moms, really close friends, because you're in the trenches with your little ones, and it feels like core memories are made during that time. So Chelsea was there for me during probably one of the hardest times in my life. And I just love that we've been able to maintain our friendship, work together. And it's amazing watching the woman that you've become over the last 12 years that we've known each other.
Ditto. I feel the same about you, love.
You've got so much going on in your life. The substitute teaching is so new. That's
It's
so
so new.
exciting.
But it's funny because my kids love it. They're like, "Are you going to sub in my building today?" So even my 13-year-old who tells me I'm annoying all the time, just please sub for my teacher. So anyway, it's been good, and I love kids.
You're literally wearing all the hats. So tell us about Lauren and her birth and just her story, however you want to go about that.
So like I said, she's 7. I'm just going to preface it by saying I've just continued to learn a lot. And it's something I enjoy doing. I love to learn. And there's so much I could say about her story. But basically, you don't know what you don't know. Her story is very unique. She does not have an official diagnosis. And through that, we're learning a lot. God has just been at the center of it. Looking back now, moving forward, we just see his hands through Lauren and her story and who she is and who our family has become. And I would say the biggest part of Lauren's story, I know it's somewhat medically related, but truly is my husband's salvation. Just the joy that Lauren brings, it's something you can't explain. She's just full of life, and seeing her life, it's like God's fingerprint, like this touch that he puts on people's hearts. And he did that for my husband. And that has changed our family dynamic dramatically. Lauren was born at 36 weeks. They discharged her. I just trusted the doctors. I thought, okay, we're going home. It's okay. Even though looking back, there were some red flags. And I remember questioning it. But I felt good, and you feed your babies when they're hungry, and I was doing that. We are doing weekly weight checks until she was 9 months old. It's crazy to look back and think, I didn't know.
How much weight was she when she was born? And then when
Okay.
you went to the doctors, what was that like?
So 36 weeks, she was 6 pounds, 10 ounces when she was born, which
Which
is a
that's not
healthy
bad,
size,
normal. Yeah,
normal
normal person.
size. But London was 10 pounds and Leighton was 9 pounds, and they were full term. So I knew she was tiny. She was very small compared to my other babies. And then she lost a whole pound before we went home, which is normal. Babies lose weight before they go home. They typically gain it back within a week. It took her a whole month or longer. She was not suckling properly when we brought her home from the hospital. I think about all the things we could have done to possibly have changed the outcome, but I can't hold on to that. We came home, she wasn't suckling, should have been in the NICU, probably had an NG tube, which is the nose tube that goes into your stomach through their nose. So it's very temporary. And they usually do that to support babies who are underweight, aren't suckling, so they can continue to grow and get the nutrition without burning the calories also to nurse. And she was very jaundiced. So we are also taking her in almost daily to have her blood drawn to check her levels. I'm learning too, and this is not evident on her MRI, but jaundice can affect your brain neurologically if the buildup in your brain doesn't clear out. Just some things that we see in the past that may or may not have affected her, especially because we've just recently did genetic testing and that came back clear. The full panel of all the things that they have available to test. It's called an exome and no genetic disorder.
And all these things that you're telling me about, our oldest was in the NICU. He had that feeding tube in the NICU. All of my kids had jaundice. So
Mhm.
all of these things, you're thinking these are just normal things that babies
Yes,
have. And I could
yes,
see where when looking back on things, we might think like, what if, what if, what if, what if? But I love how you said, I don't go there. I don't go there
yeah.
because we have a very full life and
Mhm.
this is our life with Lauren. So all of these things, while there might have been red flags, still are on the normal spectrum of
Yes,
newborn stuff. So at
very normal.
what point then are you going, okay, this isn't normal? At what age?
Yeah, so 8 or 9 months when she had gotten RSV, so we took her in, she lost weight, and I think within a week or so, she hadn't gained weight back. We went in for a checkup to check her lungs, and so that was it. She was 12 pounds at 9 months. We're talking 2 pounds more than what my son was at birth. She was so tiny. So we went to see a GI doctor, and when we went for the appointment, I was sort of in denial. Like we had said all these things sounded normal, like nothing's wrong. But I had talked to a friend who has a special needs child, and she said, Chelsea, these specialists can take months to get into. Just call, get the appointment. So we got in within 2 weeks. And the first thing he said was, she's malnourished. And it's like a gut punch. How have I not known that my child's malnourished? We've been seeing the doctor every single week for almost 9 months.
That term, malnourished, sounds like poverty in Africa. You can't take care of your kids. I'm sure when you say gut punch, I'm sure that's how it felt like. I've been feeding my baby. So I can imagine the emotions that went with that.
I had told a friend after, and she was like, we've all been wondering, she's so small. And you're thinking, people have noticed, and how have I not seen it? But when you're in it, you're in it.
You can't really see the day-to-day changes in your kids. We go back to Las Vegas and my family is all like, "Whoa, your kids have gotten so big."
Mhm.
But you don't see that when you're in it every day. So she's malnourished. What does that mean? What do you do from there?
So yeah, doctor is like, plan of action. What do we do? So she has to be admitted. And they just explained, we're going to give her a nose, the NG tube, through her nose, and we're going to check all of her levels. And they keep an eye on her electrolytes. Is it her body that's rejecting the food, or does she just not eating enough? So we did that. And neurologically, there was a disconnect that she was not eating enough. So neurologically, there was a disconnect of, I need to eat more.
Her brain
Her
is
brain.
not signaling to
Mhm.
her body, "It's time to eat."
It was signaling I'm full, but her body needed more nutrition. They bring in this team of neurologists. So they do an MRI and they're like, well, the folds in her brain, we don't feel that they're developed properly.
I remember you telling me about the gray matter and the white
So,
matter. Is that what you're talking about?
yes. So the gray matter is the folds of your brain, and there's the white matter that fills it in. The folds of her brain were developed properly. It's all the matter in between that fills it, all the connections, etc., in between the folds. They found a spot in her brain where it has a little less gray matter. Here's the thing too, when it comes to medical things, is they're still learning. So the report was read that typically when they see this, it is due to an injury to the brain. So of course they're asking, have you had any injuries when you were pregnant, in the womb? And I didn't have any when I was pregnant, but when she was being delivered, they did have to push on her to come out. Even though she was C-section, she had gone up under my ribs, and so half of her face came out black and blue. She was bruised. So we thought maybe that was it. But we don't know.
She's a puzzle. I remember when you first got this report, I'm sure you had all the feelings, but I remember feeling, gosh, it would have been so much easier if they would have just been like, oh, she has Down syndrome or oh, she has autism, because then you could latch on to some sort of diagnosis that has all these resources attached to it that you could get her into these therapies and have a plan of action moving forward. But these results essentially didn't have any sort of common diagnoses to it.
Yeah, we didn't actually have any answers. So what do? We came home with the NG tube, and they were like, you're going to feed her on her normal schedule, and then whatever she doesn't finish, you'll put into the G tube. So we did that. But when you're trying to feed a baby who is sleeping in their crib with this tube, when they're rolling around, it can get wrapped and pulled out, and she would pull it out with her hand, and we'd have to reinsert it. It was a lot. So after about 3 months, there wasn't much change of her eating more on her own. We opted to have the G2 placed for better quality of life. And that was in June of 2018.
So then tell us what that means. Her G tube is placed. And how old is she when you decide?
She just turns a year old. And I go into the doctor and I talk to him about it. And he's like, have you ever seen a G2? It's actually pretty cool. It's this little button that's in your belly and you just put the food right in. And I was thinking, no, I've never seen one. And yeah, it's cool to you, but here I am. My child needs to have one and I don't even know what it looks like. I don't know anything about it. So we move forward. We meet with a GI surgeon. She has to be admitted. She has to stay the night because they have to make sure that she can tolerate the tube that's placed. They do a very small incision through the belly button to put a camera in, and they go and find your stomach itself floats around in with other organs inside your abdomen. So they move the stomach and they butt it up to your abdomen wall. And then they put the G tube through the abdomen into your stomach. And eventually, because they're butted right up next to each other, her stomach has now connected to her abdomen wall because the G tube keeps them connected. So that way the food goes into her stomach and not into her abdomen. And I have thought about, if she ever had babies, would that affect her quality of life or all of those things? And those were questions I had asked initially because they don't really walk you through that. They just kind of say, here's what we're going to do. And then they do it. So anyway, we have our G2 placed and we're there for a night and we come home and we traveled that next weekend.
So you come home and now you're a G tube mom. I just feel like special needs moms are another level of resilient because you have to be. You have to be resilient with the care of your children. And anytime we've had a special needs mom come into our macro counting community, they seem to thrive. And it kind of boggles my mind because you've got everything that an average quote, I'm like doing air quotes, an average mom has on her plate, plus all of these other things that quote unquote average moms don't have on their plate. And yet you're making macro counting work for your life in a way that's remarkable. And so I was always so inspired by clients like you, Chelsea, who's now a coach and doing all these other things, clients like Charmaine, who's in our ninja community, who has a special needs daughter. And the amount of stuff that you have to carry is just greater. It's greater than average mom. And so watching you do all these extra things and manage your own nutrition and manage your family and substitute teach and coach and it's just remarkable. It's incredible to me. And that's why I was really wanting to have you on, because it's inspiring. So tell us what being a G-tube mom means.
Okay. I'm going to fast forward because a lot in the beginning, she was a year old, and there's a lot in her story from there of her not tolerating a different type of formula and them telling me one thing and my heart knowing another, and this journey of learning that doctors have so much experience and ultimately they've studied things, but I have to make the decision of what
And
is
you're
best
with
for her.
her. You're with her every
Right.
day. You're seeing every side effect, every stool
Yes.
sample. You've got more data on this child than any doctor could ever have.
Yeah, I'm living it. I'm in it with her. And when you have a child who's nonverbal, who can't tell you anything, you almost have to be them in order to best help them, which can sometimes be a hindrance because you know what they need rather than having them express what they need. So the jump from formula to changing her diet to was called a partially blended diet, which is a whole story in itself. I started mixing her formula with baby food.
How old is she at this point?
A year and a half at this point.
So up
Um,
until then, it was just all formula. And
formula.
all of a sudden, you're like, her stomach's not tolerating this. I need to make this shift
Yes.
to have
Yep.
her eat whole foods.
The doctor's like, she has reflux and she's puking up this Pediasure. Well, it was not reflux. It was the Pediasure. So we went back to regular formula and started adding in baby food. We started with peas and stopped puking almost immediately. It was such a relief. Okay, I can feed my child again. Over the next 2 years, we stuck with that. And then it wasn't until July of 2020 that I started making her actual food. We were seeing a dietitian regularly to help us navigate her weight and her height to track her growth. And I kept thinking, I'm tracking my own macros, I'm feeding my family. And then I realized, well, you've been doing this yourself. Just do that for her. So that's how the journey started, from baby food to real food that I was making at home for her blended diet.
Amazing. And one of the things that we didn't talk about is Lauren's disability now. How is she different as a 7-year-old now than an average 7-year-old? She's no longer malnourished, but she still has low muscle tone,
Yeah,
right?
so
So what
that's
are some of those factors?
so right now Lauren is 7. She is in a special ed classroom because she is nonverbal. She still has physical handicaps in that going up and down stairs, it's difficult for her. It's a lot of work. She has low muscle tone, which also can affect her cough when she's sick. She does not
Her
have a walker. She started walking without a walker at age 3, but she does wear SMOs, which supports her feet and ankles to help them keep straight because she has low muscle tone. So Lauren was not growing lengthwise for up to 9 months. And then she had another gap after she was a year for about 5 months, and from year 1 to 2. And when a child starts walking around a year old, they have much shorter limbs. Well, she didn't start walking until she was 2 with the walker. So she had much longer limbs. And at this point, her growth was more rapid from age 2 to 3 than it was from 0 to 1, because the
Yep.
malnourished to being fully nourished, she had a lot of catch up growth to make up. So that was holding her back from doing things well. There's this disconnect in the top part of her body, which was weaker from being malnourished in the first 9 months than her bottom half when she did have enough nourishment to grow for walking. So even crawling now, she struggles to crawl and still does not do it like what a typical person would, how they would crawl.
Okay, so she's nonverbal, she has the low muscle tone,
Mhm.
and she has the G-tube. And so when you go into a school,
Mhm.
what do you tell the school? I mean, obviously, I know you've got like a file probably the size
Yeah,
of
I do.
a book stack, but what do you tell them that she needs?
So the first thing is just making sure they're able to feed her. It's not hard, and we have 16-year-old babysitters that can do it. It just seems scary. When we go over what her schedule is, I make it as simple as possible for them. And she's nonverbal, so there are cues and things they have to learn to get to know her and what her needs are. And then incontinence, which is she still wears a diaper. So that's another thing. They change her diaper for her at school. She is in a special ed classroom for her homeroom, but she is in a general education building, so she does have some time with the general education population in the school. She is loved so much. She does recess with the gen ed kids, lunch with the gen ed kids. They feed her through her tube in the gen ed lunchroom. So they're all learning along with her, which is really cool.
And the other thing about Lauren is she is very engaged. She sees you. She knows when you're talking to her. She gets excited to see you. It's not like there's nothing. I don't know how to explain that over the podcast, but she's very engaging.
I will say there is a level of autism there in that she does prefer to do her own thing, but she does like to be engaged if you're entertaining her or if she needs something from you. She knows her name and she is learning to understand words, more phrases. Lauren, can you show me what you want? And so she can point now. That's something that's new. So it's really cool to see this progression of what a typical child goes through, but just basically at a later stage in life. Do I think she'll ever be at a typical adult understanding? No, but it's still cool to see her. And I feel like we just celebrate her milestones. We're thankful for them even more. Your kid starts pointing when they're, I don't know, 6 months, and you're like, cool, what's next? They have another tooth. And we're like, Lauren's pointing and she can tell us what she wants. The reason I use the autism spectrum is for a lot of listeners that probably have more familiarity with that. She's not going over to children on her own to engage unless she's interested specifically with what they're doing. It's not just for the interaction with them.
Similarities in terms of like resources on how to help her. Maybe
Yes.
caregivers that are experienced with autism might be able to help her in that way.
Yes. I have some clients, more than a few, that their children that have autism or ADHD. They are hyper. They have a hard time focusing. They don't have patience. They have a hard time sitting still or understand they need cue to be quiet when you're in a room full. Like last night, we were at London's band concert and Lauren's ready for it to start and they're setting up and she's loud and I can't tell her shh. And so most people seem to understand, but some are just like, this kid is not being quiet. And anyway, so that can fall under special needs.
So you are feeding her this blended diet. So now I want you to tell us kind of about your own personal macro journey and how that's impacted your ability to feed her a macro balanced diet.
I started tracking my macros when Tracy twisted my arm. No, I'm just kidding. But she offered. And I thought, okay, my husband told me never stick with anything, but I just did not feel good in my skin. So it was time. I had to try something. And for my clients that are listening, who I start you out at 105 grams of protein, Tracy said 130 grams of protein. I was for sure eating 100 grams. And she's like, 130 grams. And I did it and I felt so much better. So I started, like I said, in October. Tracy's coaching me, and I have this 5-month-old who's not sleeping, and I was nursing, and I could nurse while tracking, and I saw my weekly pictures change drastically. The scale was very slow, but I knew I had more energy and I felt better. I learned what protein was. I learned what carbohydrates were, what fats were. And there were a lot of nights. I'm a picky eater, so I was eating egg whites to hit that protein. But I don't have to do that anymore, thankfully. I have
And you get a
pro
ton of protein now. You're way past 130 grams.
I know I am past 130 grams, but it was hard when I was not eating a lot of meat. I could eat cereal for dinner. I did not like to cook. I learned how to cook for my family.
Yeah, and I've actually heard you say that in some ways God was preparing you for life with Lauren because of what you knew from macro counting. So tell us about the transition to tube feeding her whole foods yourself.
So, like I said, July of 2020, almost 3 years, I had been tracking my macros, and I'm just going to feed her that way. So, I started by cooking a meat, cooking some vegetables and a starch or a carb like sweet potatoes or regular potatoes, quinoa. And then I started using Fairlife milk because it has more protein in it, full fat because that's important for brain development. And I just blended it. I fed her and yeah, here we are. Looking back, I remember there's a lot of trial and error, but now I just cook for her every 3 to 4 days. That exact
So again, Chelsea came to visit me right after we moved to Florida, and she had a list of things that she needed. Laura needs ground turkey. I need you to get me some sweet potatoes. I need broccoli. And you were really good about just, I mean, if you're going to eat it, we'll just blend it for her food. But then watching you whip out the Vitamix, blend this thing into pure liquid, and insert it with a syringe in her tube, my kids were enthralled by the whole process, even enthralled by the color. It's like this light brown color that it turns out, and just watching them. And I remember Jacob saying, "This girl eats healthier than everybody in the whole house." And I just love that. I love that statement. But watching you do it was so awesome. I love how you mentioned it's just a system and a routine that you've built into your life now, that you
Mhm.
have steps that you have to do every 3 to 4 days so that your daughter has food.
The fact that I started my macros and my transition from we are not eating out, that's not an option, to doctor's appointments where I had to pack my food if we were driving an hour into the city. I had my snacks or my lunch with me because I was not eating out. And so that really prepared me for Lauren. She couldn't eat out, so I had to pack her food with us. So it kind of went hand in hand, and how I was living my life was already setting us up for how we were going to be living her life.
And isn't that so insightful to think, if I wouldn't blend this up in a blender and feed it to my child with a tube, it really makes you second guess kind of the choices that you make for your kids. We're not going through the Chick-fil-A drive. Am I going to blend up some nuggets and some fries for no way. I would never do that. And
Right.
the whole convenience piece of it is just taken totally out of the question because it's no longer convenient to go through the drive-through when you still have a kid to feed. And so I love how you mentioned that. I was thinking about how so many of our clients feel like their lives are just ripped out from under them when they have to start tracking macros. They can't enjoy a full life. They can't do the same things they used to do. And again, I was just so inspired by life has not stopped for your family, Chelsea, and you macro count and you have a daughter that has a GI tube. What practical advice and tips do you have for people that might be feeling limited by macro counting?
I remember when I started, I would not eat at my friend's house, or I would just not eat if we went out. If you want to make changes, you want to feel better, you have to make those changes in other aspects of your life. So if I want Lauren to grow, I can't just not feed her. Like you said, I'm not going to just blend up goldfish and give that to her because it's not balanced and she won't grow if that's all she's eating. And so I just think it's important for us to remember that.
I was thinking about how you have to. It's not a choice for you anymore.
Mhm.
Right. And you kind of have to turn that switch on in your brain. This isn't, should I go to this party and drink alcohol? When the choice is just taken away from you, you just do what you have to do.
Mhm.
And that's kind of what I hear you saying is I just did it because I have to do it. And if you want to change your life, you're going to have to choose the hard thing before those choices are taken away from you. And you have to change your diet because it's medically necessary.
I tell my clients all the time, I have been where you are. I have walked through this journey of having a special needs child, having little ones, a husband who works 2 jobs, being home and birthday parties, celebrations, etc. But when you're on the other side of it, you look back and are just so thankful that you didn't give in. It's that instant gratification versus the long-term journey is not worth it. Not giving into that makes a huge difference. And don't sacrifice your goals to appease what you think other people want you to do or think you should be doing.
That's great. I never come home from a party and the next day go, dang, I really wish I would have had those Oreos and that cookie. Never. You never would say that the next day, but you would say the reverse. Gosh, I wish I would just stuck to my guns. Why didn't I just stick to my guns? And I think sometimes we're just chasing that feeling. You don't even really care about the food, it's the feeling. And so if you instead realize that you can socialize with your friends and that's going to fill your cup. You can go for a walk and that's going to fill your cup. There are other ways to get that feeling without indulging in all the things and feeling like you're missing out. Let's transition to talk about all children. I got this Instagram message from a follower recently, and this is what it said. I recently started following you and I love your content. I'm trying to see how I can start making macro meals for my family too. My question is, I have 4 kids. I really am trying my hardest to get us healthy and fit without causing unhealthy food relationships. Right now, all of my kids overeat. We are all so unhealthy, including my husband. It feels so overwhelming to know how to teach them to eat right without causing an eating disorder. My mom has had an eating disorder all my life, and I'm afraid of causing my kids to go through that same path. I don't even know what the right portion sizes are for my kids who are 4, 7, 9, and 11. I feel so lost right now. Where should I start? What would you say to this mom, Chelsea?
My husband has a history of overeating also, and I come from a background of I don't have the knowledge of how to eat balance. Like I said, I would eat cereal for dinner. So learning what macros are, what foods are what macros, and how to eat them balanced has really helped our family. And I just teach that to my kids. I don't focus on the scale. I'm always squeezing my daughter's arms. Wow, you're so strong, and building her up in that way. And so I would just say learn what foods have what macros in them and then teach that to your kids. My kids will come home and they're like, I'm so hungry. And they go right for the easy snacks, the goldfish, the Dots pretzels. Have some real food that you find in the fridge, something that has protein in it. You're not going to feel full if you don't eat some protein. Does that make
Right.
sense? All right.
And that's a good litmus test too. Would you say, if Lauren needed a snack, would you blend up some goldfish and put that in? I'm sure your kids would be like, no, mom would never do that. I felt so sad for that lady because she seemed so desperate and so lost and wanting to help her kids, but being so fearful and how to approach it because of the eating disorder background. I told her, make sure you focus on yourself. You need to focus on what a healthy portion is for you so that you can look at food and know what your kids need. And I love that you talked about that this whole journey, and macro counting has taught you that cereal for breakfast isn't going to cut it. And because of that, if your kids come home hungry, they're not going to get a bowl of cereal. They're going to pair it with high protein, nutrient dense, whole food options. But yeah, the eating disorder thing just breaks my heart. And I think what you were saying about your daughter and not focusing on making her smaller, this isn't about becoming smaller. This is about growing big muscles and being strong and having longevity in your health by the time that you're a grandpa. And that's a whole different why than I want you to look cute in this dress and teeny and tiny and petite.
Mhm.
So
We actually, it's funny because my 10-year-old is 10 to 15 pounds less than my 13-year-old. And my 13-year-old's this long and skinny string bean. He has some muscle definition, but Leighton is just strong and more muscular. And she's like, I'm 100 pounds. And she's proud of the 100 pounds. Oh, you should weigh less. I'm like, no, yeah, girl, you have a lot of muscle. And I build her in that way. But also, she likes to eat meat and she eats a well balanced meal for breakfast a majority of the time, for lunch and for dinner. And in that, she can still enjoy some of the things she likes, like popsicles or a small bowl of ice cream or hot Cheetos. That's her thing. And so she knows that she has to still be eating balance, that that's not going to fulfill her. I don't know if I said this earlier, but both of my kids, my big kids, they roll their eyes anytime the word protein comes up in conversation in our home or with friends. They're just like, oh, but people, they're like, yeah, I need to figure out how to eat more protein. And it's like, my kids know how to. They have the tools to do that without feeling lost, and turn long term how to feed their family. Make the changes. It is 100% worth it.
When you were talking about your kids rolling their eyes at protein, I was thinking about that Instagram video. I don't know if you've seen this, Chelsea, but it's like, take the amount of pounds that you weigh and multiply it by the number of stars in the sky. Do you know what I'm talking about? Have you seen that
Yes,
video?
I think I've seen one
Oh, it
similar
does.
too.
Oh, it's
It's
so
like
funny.
protein here, protein there.
Oh,
All
yes.
the
I
protein.
never realized how much I'd have to think about protein as an adult. So if you had 3 steps, Chelsea, that any parent can take today to start making their kids' meals more macro balanced, what would you do?
Educate them. Keep it simple. Pick a protein, pick a side and a vegetable, and that can be it. It doesn't have to look fancy. It doesn't have to be a meal prepped recipe if that's not what works for you. So I think just letting go of what you think it has to look like and just making it fit for your family.
Yeah, that's what kids like is separates. They don't want you to combine
No,
anything. They want a separate meat, separate vegetable. Don't make my food touch. But yeah, that's perfect for macros. That's really easy.
I need easy, I need convenience, and that fits our family.
Things that I would throw out there that are just easy parenting hacks that you can implement if you stay strong. And really, that's the first tip is just stay strong as a parent because they don't have the capacity. I mean, we barely have the capacity to resist a bag full of chips. As an adult, I don't have that capacity. So some things just have to be out of sight, out of mind. It's like the control with the device, right? We are addicted as adults to these devices. So sure, it's going to be harder for your kids. And that's how it is with food too. Of course, they're going to struggle with soda at every event and all the red food dye and every single thing that you see. And so just some really easy basic rules that our family implements is water only, unless we're going to some fancy thing where they let them have a fun drink. But the general rule in our house is water only. Also, you have to eat your vegetables if you want dessert. And that just trains them to see if it's worth it. I have kids that will plug their nose and gag down the vegetable because they want that's the pull that we're dealing with here. It's like a little drug for them to have that dessert. And then I have kids that are like, I hate that salad. It's not worth it to me. I'm skipping. And so again, you have to stay strong through those implementations that you make, but those are really simple things. And then the other third practical thing I was thinking of if your kid wants seconds, which we have kids that are always like, can I have more? Can I have more? Can I have more? We always say yes to the meat. Yep, you can have more meat and vegetables. If you still want more, you have to have more meat and vegetables. If they say no to that, then they don't really want more. They just want another roll. They just want more of the stuff that's not great for them. So, those are just 3 practical takeaways. Water only, no dessert if you haven't had your vegetables. If you want seconds, protein and vegetables. 3 easy things for any mom to think about. Chelsea, can you think of anything else that you want to add to this?
Yeah, I agree with all of those things. I would also say it's okay to tell your kids no. I think that we have gotten away from that. We feel afraid to tell our kids no because they're going to be upset with us, but it is our job to provide for them and care for them well.
Sturdy parent. That's what Dr. Becky always says. Be the sturdy leader in the room. My kids always say, but her mom lets her do blah, blah, blah. Nothing triggers me more than another mom that is letting her kids drink all the soda they could ever hope for. What do you say to your kids when they say that to you, Chels? But his mom lets him watch his iPad screen every hour of the day.
I say, well, that's how they do it, and this is how we do it in our home, and that's okay. It's okay because I love you, and I'm not doing these things to be mean to you. I'm doing them because I love you. And even though it won't be for another 20 years, one day you'll thank me. Everyone does things differently, and that's okay. And I think it's important too for our kids as they get older and have social media, that comparison of it's okay that that family's doing that and that we're doing it this way.
Awesome. Well, I am going to link in the show notes Chelsea's transformation, which is absolutely incredible, plus a story about special needs moms and how resilient they are and how great they are with macro counting. And then also how to teach your kids about food in a healthy way. We'll link all those. But Chelsea, I cannot thank you enough for being here and sharing your wisdom. I love you, my friend.
I love you. Thanks for having me.
We appreciate you tuning in to the Stay Fit Mom podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. Connect with us on social media and head to stayfitmom.com for more resources and tips. You've got this. See you next time.